Hello, this is a walkthrough video for Lab 302, which deals with SQL Server Management Studio. So, in this particular activity, you will learn how to create a database in SQL Server Management Studio, SSMS, modify the tables and the relationships between them, and then we'll enter the data into the tables. In the last lab, you were already given a database that you just needed to attach and then start querying. But just like the Blue Ridge University in the previous lab, you will need to make a database like that. So let's see how to do that. Believe me, it looks like there are a lot of steps, but once you go through this once, it will be very simple. So in this lab, I'm not going to show you how to get to UDesk or start SSMS. We already covered that, so I hope you already are familiar with it. So the first thing we'll do is create a folder in your student shared directory named pet store. And here's the path for it. So I'll copy this path and we will go to your directory and then create a folder called pet store. So I have already logged into UDesk. I have already opened SSMS. To go to your folder, I want to open File Explorer by searching for it. Once it's open, we copied the path. Let's put the path here. The last two characters is hash sign. So let's take that out. Instead of those hash sign, what you will do is you will put the number that was assigned to your instance. In my case, it is 00. And whatever was your instance number, you will use the same one. So hit enter. It takes you there. I have a lot of folders here. You should not see these many folders or files. So let's go ahead and create a folder named pet store. So right click anywhere and go to a new folder. And I'm going to name this as pet_store. Okay, so let's do that. Once you do that, your folder is created. Now you can minimize this window. We are going to create a database and save our database in this folder. So I'm going to minimize it. To create a new database, I will go to the icon which says database, right click and click on new database. This will allow us to create a new database here. It may take a little bit of time. The database name that you want is going to be last name _ pet _ store. So whatever your last name is, use that _ pet _ store. Okay, and then we will save this to your directory that you just created, the pet store. So let's change the path. So we will go to file name over here, and for the first one I'm going to go ahead and select. So we were under student shares, under your CIS 00 or 08, whatever you had. Within this, I'm going to look for the folder pet store, the one that we just created. So in my case, it's right there. So let me select to that folder. It means my new database is going to be selected and saved here. Also, I need to do the same thing for the log file. So go ahead, show the path to that folder. So student share, in my case, it's CIS 00, but you will select your own instance and then go ahead and select pet store. So now we go ahead and hit OK here. You will see as soon as we did that, you will see a new database created in your system. It's called Agrawal Pet Score. In your case, it will be your last name pet score. Now, if you don't see that yet, you can click on database and right here you have a refresh blue button for refresh. You can click it. It will update the recent changes and you should be able to see your database that you just created. Right now, let me expand this and you will see that we don't have any diagram yet. So yes, we need to create them. Again, you will see that there are some system tables and file tables, but no user tables. So we need to create some tables here. Before we do any of that, our instruction says that we need to create a Word document named last name, first name, pet store docx to record our queries. So let's go ahead and open a Word document and make sure we save it correctly as suggested. I would do file save as and save it somewhere we can retrieve it. Let's say my documents. And I'm renaming it using my name. You can use your name to save it. Now let's go ahead and start creating our tables. The instruction shows you the database diagram. You can see the names for all the columns in each of the tables. And here are some hints for you for data types. So it says use int or integer data type for all the IDs. So store ID, supplier name, pet ID, everything that's an ID, pet store ID is going to be integer. Then use money for price and cost. Anywhere we have price, we have cost, we are going to have money data type. Then use char2 for the state. So char2 is a character data type. It means if you say char2, it means exactly the data has to be 2 characters. It cannot be 1, it cannot be 3 or more. So char is a text data type which allows you to have exactly 2 characters. So wherever we have the state like SUP state for the supplier state, store state are going to be char2. Then we have varchar25. Varchar is a character data type or text data type that allows up to whatever digits you specify. If you say varchar25, it means this field can have data or text data up to 25 characters. To create the database, we'll go into SSMS and right click the name of the database. So last name underscore pet score, and we'll start a new query. Once we do that, the SQL editor opens and we can start typing here. To make sure that whatever queries we are writing is using this newly created database and no other database, we need to make sure to use the command use and the name. So Agrawal underscore pet underscore store. In your case, use the name that you created and then go. Space. Go. So let's go ahead and write the create table statement. Before that, we will use comments. So I told you before that if you do 2 dashes, this was a single line comment. There's another way to do comments, which is you do a / star and you end this with a star and /. Anything that you write between this is going to be a comment, and this is actually a multi-line comment, so it doesn't matter how many lines you use in between. So I'm going to use the comment as create table using SQL. And just so you can remember later, I will say this is a multi-line comment example. You don't have to do it, just so you remember we can do a multi-line comment. Now, right underneath the comments, I'll start typing our create table statement. So we'll start with create table, and then we need to give it a table name. So the table name that our diagram has is TBL underscore pet. So TBL underscore PET. And right after that, I start a parentheses and end a parentheses. So the entire create table statement is going to be within these 2 parentheses. So let's enter a few lines here, and I'm going to type right here. So the first variable we have is pet underscore pet ID, and it is an integer variable. So pet underscore pet ID, and we'll have a space. I can type int to indicate that this is an integer variable. Now we are going to apply a constraint on this field indicating that this is the primary key. And why do I know that? Well, if you go back to your instructions, you will see in the diagram, it says this yellow icon indicating that this is the primary key. So one thing we need to make sure that this is an ID, so the data type is going to be int, and we need to have an additional constraint on it saying this is a primary key. Same thing we will do when we get to store ID, same thing when we get to the supplier name. So let's go ahead and work on it. So you may have the constraint put in the same line. Make sure you don't make a typing mistake. So constraint, and the constraint is going to be that this is a primary key. Before you go there, give it a name. So a good style is to use pk underscore table name. So pk indicating primary key, you can give it any name, but the name that I suggest is this. So you are going to say pk as in this is the primary key of pet table. Okay, there is no hard and fast rule about this name, but this is just a convention people use. And what kind of constraint this is? This is a primary key constraint. So that's all about this column. So every time you end something about the column, you are going to enter a comma to separate it from the next column. So the next column is pet underscore type. And this is a varchar, so we'll have a space and varchar. This is varchar 25. Once again, there is no constraint on this, so let's move to the next line. Before we do, hit a comma. So next column is pet description, which is again a varchar. So let me type that. Okay, 25, comma. The next one is pet price. Okay, I need to make sure it's consistent, so I need to change a little bit here. Okay, pet underscore price, which is money data type, so money, no other constraints, so comma. Go to the next column, pet cost. Again, this is money, no constraint, next line. Then the next variable is pet supplier name. So pet underscore supplier name. And I would just keep making sure that I'm typing it exactly as we have. This is again a text data, so varchar 25. Here we do have a constraint suggesting that you cannot have the supplier name empty. So you cannot have null values in there or cannot leave it blank. So the constraint we'll use is not null. You don't have to use a constraint keyword. You can do that. Otherwise, you can just type not null and comma. This just indicates that this field cannot be left blank when entering data into the table. So finally, we have the last field called pet store ID, and it is an ID, so it's going to be integer. Once again, this is the primary key of another table, so you can't leave it blank, so we will have the not null constraint placed here. Now, pet store ID is the very last column, so we don't need comma as a separator, so no comma in the last line. And I'm going to delete these extra spaces that we have, and it takes us to the parentheses, and after parentheses I will hit a semicolon indicating I have completed my create table statement. So in SQL usually we use semicolon as a separator between multiple SQL statements or SQL statements. So if you have create table statements and then multiple create table statements, you can separate them by semicolon. Same thing if you have multiple select statement or any other SQL statement. To indicate that you have finished this statement, you can use a semicolon. So let's go ahead, use a go, select this whole thing and go execute. So I'm hoping if there are no typos or syntax mistake, I should have the table created. The message says commands completed successfully, and I should be able to see the table here. It doesn't show right now, so I will click on my database, highlight it, and then go click the refresh button on top. And now if I go back to my tables, I should be able to see dbo.tbl-pet. So my table is now created. Just so you know, we just created the table. So this is just the basic structure of the table, just the rows and columns, no data into the table yet. So if you want to check if there is any data in a table, remember we did a small query, select star from table name. In this case, my table is tbl_pet, semicolon, go. I'm going to execute this to see if there is any data that should be listed from this query. So you see, we have no data, only the column names are appearing. So the logical next step is to enter data in our tables. That's what we will do in the next video.